Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Pay Now Buy Later. Today I had the pleasure of interviewing Swen Lorenz, who is the CEO of Sania Capital Management, and we dove deep into Fiverr and we talked a lot about the current management's execution and the future scope that it can cover. So before we dive into our interview, I'll give you a brief overview on what Fiverr does. So Fiverr is an Israeli freelance services marketplace for businesses. Currently, Fiverr has a market cap of only 5 billion US dollars and has a huge total addressable market. The US gig economy is currently valued at $5 trillion dollars, and COVID-19 has only accelerated that. Fiverr is 100% digital and has many legs to stand on. So my guest today, Swen Lorenz, actually wrote a very detailed report on Fiverr back in April 22nd, 2020, when Fiverr was only trading at around $20, and since then Fiverr has almost 10x. The current price of Fiverr is sitting at 190, and it's hitting all-time highs. So I highly recommend reading this report to gain a very detailed understanding of what Fiverr does and what it stands for and the vision it has for the future of work. So before we move on to the interview, I'll give you a quick overview on the latest company presentation as well. So Fiverr is literally revolutionizing the future of work. So in that presentation, you can see the comparisons between the traditional workplaces and the future of work, and Fiverr stands at the cusp of this latest disruption. And the current market opportunity is 115 billion and expanding. And as you can see, the majority of freelancing is still done offline, and Fiverr is a leader in the online freelancing business, and it has a huge runway left to go. So basically, this is how Fiverr works. A seller lists a service for $100. The buyer then pays 105 to Fiverr. The work starts immediately upon order according to the requirements of the buyer, and the Fiverr pays the seller $80. So essentially, they take a commission of 25%. Amounts of uncertainty, that's very important, where if one of your revenue streams get affected, you have multiple legs to stand on. The additional products Fiverr has include Fiverr Learn, which is an e-learning platform which is very important going forward and which helps the sellers improve their skills and improve their probability of getting hired. And they have Anchor, which is a subscription revenue for freelance business management software, Clearwise, which was one of their latest acquisitions, and it's a subscription-based content marketing platform that targets medium to large-size businesses. And furthermore, their growth rate is phenomenal. They have gross margins of over 80%. They're constantly innovating and their growth is accelerating. And the spend per buyer has increased from just within 2020, it has increased from 170 to 195. So Fiverr was actually meant to be profitable by next year, but because of the acceleration provided by COVID and the other tailwinds, they achieved profitability a year earlier. And now, with gross margins of 80%, you can only imagine what kind of free cash flows they'll generate. And Fiverr Business is one of my favorite products with Fiverr, and I think personally that has a lot of potential more than their other products. It is a dedicated environment for business buyers to transact and collaborate on Fiverr, and you can collaborate with your team on Fiverr, and the best part is it's free for one entire year. So Fiverr takes care of hiring quality freelancers for you, anything to do with budgets, share favorite sellers, and other collaboration tools, much similar to Slack. So I've left a link for the full podcast episode down in the description below. The following is just the snippets where we talk deep about Fiverr. And also I've left a link for Swen's deep dive into Fiverr and the ways you can reach and connect with him. And before we proceed, please make sure you like and subscribe. And if you have any comments, feedback, or suggestions, please leave a comment and enjoy the deep dive. I think the market cap is above 5 billion. For me personally, I think, especially in your report, you mentioned that the total addressable market just in the US is 135 billion. And going forward, Fiverr could be at the cusp of the future of work. So is in that case, is your this is still valid.
Absolutely. And I featured it not knowing and not anticipating that the price was going to go up quite that quickly. I thought that was going to be a slightly slower ascent. I wrote about it from the perspective of this is a company that you should probably own throughout the entire 2020s. Buy some stock, put it away, because as you just alluded to, a tiny fraction of the world's freelancing market is online so far. And there is no other company that has quite the same model as Fiverr. It's surprising, but they have managed to create a moat around themselves, even though you think it's online and it's putting people together, and why doesn't Facebook and LinkedIn do it? But they do have a moat. And I think the market, one of the reasons why the stock has gone up so dramatically is because the market has started to realize there's no one else out there. And all of a sudden, the old story about when people speak of an overnight success, but the reality is that overnight success took 10 or 20 years to create. It just looks like an overnight success. And what people forget, and what's actually really worth reading up about, is that Fiverr invested 10 years of sweat and blood and a lot of investor money into creating the platform that they now have. And they have focused on nothing but that one idea to create the world's best platform for freelancers, which a few companies have done in very different ways, but they're the only one who've done it quite in the specific Fiverr way. And I don't see a reason why they shouldn't just keep growing. And but as I mentioned earlier, even Apple had along the way had phases where the stock just dropped by 50%. And I'm sure Fiverr will also have periods when the stock drops 50%. And it could go sideways for 2 or 3 years because maybe the market is ahead of itself right now and it all went up too fast. But come the year 2030, you'll probably be very, very, very happy if you've kept some Fiverr stock somewhere hidden away.
Thing about Fiverr is one way I generally identify moats is through verbs, and I'm pretty sure you've identified it as well, especially with your Google. So Netflix and chill, Google it, just Uber it. So how likely is it that we're gonna see? Why don't you just Fiverr it?
I think that's already happening.
Is it?
I,
Oh,
I, I'm not kidding. I've been receiving a lot of emails from people, and I have already seen that used as a verb. And it doesn't work with Upwork because it's a totally different model. And then there's freelancer.com in Australia, which is like too much of a niche company to even mention. So I'd say, count me in for the people who believe that it'll become a verb.
as we both know, they have a few legs to stand on. It's just not the platform for sellers and buyers. That's what I initially thought, and I was wrong. So I initially disregarded it as, oh, it's just a platform for sellers and buyers to exchange their skills. But obviously, they are way more than that. They've kept innovating and adding new layers to their already base foundation. So with the arms of Fiverr, the main one and the most important one for me going forward is Fiverr Business, where people can actually collaborate with each other, um, employ curated quality freelancers. What are your thoughts on Fiverr Business?
So I think we need to just take a step back and speak about for a moment what is the key advantage of using Fiverr.
Yeah.
And there are other freelancer platforms that have tried to create a model where you could hire a freelancer through the web based on an hourly rate. And Fiverr very specifically does not do that. Instead, they have turned everything into a unit that clients can purchase in a way where they know exactly what they're going to pay for that unit. I mean, to give you an idea, if you hire someone to translate a text through Fiverr, you're not going to pay that person for the number of hours they're going to spend on it, but you're going to pay them based on per 500 words or per 1,000 words. So if you say I've got 5,000 words, you know exactly in advance what the price is going to be, and it doesn't matter how long that person takes. And that seems like a very simple idea, but that is something that no one has done quite in the same way as Fiverr, and that has created a moat, because what it leads to is it makes transactions much more easy to compare, and that makes it faster to get a transaction done on Fiverr. It's you don't need to shop around for too long, and the time saving from that and the overall gain in efficiency is just worth a lot to the customers, which is why Fiverr gets away with charging a lot more commissions. They charge 25% on that, which is extraordinary. But the customer is quite happy to pay it because it's such a reliable and transparent way of dealing with each other. And now on the back of that, I think Fiverr has an, an almost unimaginable number of opportunities to expand. It's really more a question of managing all that and not doing too much too quickly. To give your followers an idea and your listeners, I mean, Fiverr has 300 product categories right now, and nothing would stop them from adding even more. But I think a more obvious way for expanding is to specifically address more different groups of customers. And one of them is, for example, people who don't speak English. So Fiverr has launched a version in Spanish and in German and probably a few other languages by now. And that captures much broader markets all of a sudden. And then there is what you mentioned, Fiverr Business. And I mean, I've used Fiverr as I'm an individual, but I'm also a business at the same time. And businesses are latching onto that. And I mean, now there's, the boundary between business and individual is blurring anyway. All of a sudden, everyone is now an entrepreneur of sorts. There's incredible growth potential there. And, digital goods are, it's highly scalable. And so far, maybe 2 or 3% of the world's freelancing market is online. No one really knows for sure because there are no reliable figures, but it's tiny in any case. So they just have to scale it up now. The model works, scale it up, and you're good to go.
The other two best ones are Fiverr Studios, where you have one team of skilled freelancers for your writing, report writing, your video design, which I also think it goes hand in hand with Fiverr Business. And the other main one is Fiverr Learn. For sellers, if they do Fiverr accredited courses, they could have the potential of, being bought out for a high premium by the buyers. So which could entice the sellers to actually go after Fiverr accredited courses, which could also improve their revenue.
Yep. And I mean, what you mentioned is the perfect example for, in a way, a trip down memory lane. I'm old enough to remember when Amazon, for example, added the feature that people could sell their used books through Amazon. That was revolutionary, all of a sudden you could list your own books on Amazon, sell them, and you'd get money back. And that seems like such a normal thing nowadays, but that was a real innovation at the time. And Fiverr is now, in some ways, I mean, this is always apples and pears. These comparisons never quite work perfectly, but you could say in many ways Fiverr is where Amazon was probably in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And the runway they have is just incredibly long. There's so much to be done in the market they're operating in.
Yeah. The biggest selling points for Fiverr would be the incredibly high gross margin. Even Amazon didn't have it, 83% to 84%, and with a huge total addressable market. I mean, you can't ask for more than that for a good business.
It's unbelievable, yeah. And when you look at the number, it does seem to be too good to be true. But what can I say? It's right
Yeah.
now it's working very well for them.
And
But
that's
never
why,
forget that. Yeah, never forget it was 10 years of sweat and blood and investor money going down the drain. So
yeah,
it
yeah,
seems so easy now, but it wasn't.
yeah. It takes 10 years to become an overnight success.
Yeah, at
Yeah.
least usually 20.
Let's talk a bit more about competition. And you talked about Upwork, freelancer as well. And Upwork is a key competitor. I think they do more B2B than B2C. So Fiverr is doing more B2C. Yeah.
Correct. So Upwork typically has customers that spend $5,000 on a job or upwards of that. They also have a very different customer acquisition model. So whereas Fiverr gets a lot of organic customers, Upwork actually has sales teams. And Fiverr also creates a lot of content that they sponsor or that they try to make, go around the world in a viral way. But Fiverr will never have a sales team, which is also extraordinary, and which is exactly the way you want it. You want to do content marketing rather than to have people pick up the phone or send emails, or send out silly emails to LinkedIn. Um, and that's why I feel it's very much apples and pears. Yes, they are competitors in ways, but it's also so different that it's not really a direct comparable.
Yeah, and most people I know that they talk about Fiverr versus Upwork, but I actually have a different opinion with regards to their competition, which is LinkedIn. LinkedIn they already have LinkedIn Learning, and they have the benefit of the network effect. I mean, literally everyone's on LinkedIn, but only a few percentage of people are on Fiverr. And they actually, if they innovate enough, they can actually leverage that network effect and pretty much give similar offerings as Fiverr has, and that could actually affect Fiverr's potential market share.
LinkedIn definitely has a shot at it. Um, I would question though, if you think about Fiverr spending the better part of the last 5 years focusing on nothing but improving their product. And starting in about 2015, Fiverr had access to management members of Wix.com, uh, another very successful company. And they've very much spent the last 5 years improving their product and strategizing how to take this business forward. And despite all the resources they had and all the experienced people from Wix.com and all the experienced people from Fiverr who had already been there for a couple of years, it still took them so long. And I just doubt, and I'm putting this in somewhat general terms, so I'm speaking from a user perspective. I think the website of Fiverr has so much depth to it that I can totally see how this is a piece of work that has been created over years and that no one else would easily be able to recreate overnight, because there's always a certain magic and a certain, there are trade secrets to this. It's not, even though you can look at the entire website, it's not obvious to you how you could copy that and create exactly the same combination. So I struggle to see how LinkedIn, as a division of Microsoft, who've had their own long-term struggles with all sorts of things, and I mean, LinkedIn is still struggling in many ways. I would say LinkedIn should first get all its job ads right, and I love following job ads on LinkedIn because I daydream about interesting jobs that I could do, and I still find that they're lacking in many ways in their core business. So before they have a chance at cracking the code to competing with Fiverr, I think I don't think that's very very likely.
One of the other key risks that I wanted to talk about Fiverr was the take rate compression, and the management talks about it as well. Not the take rate compression, but they talk about their competition in terms of offline. So they don't regard Upwork and other platforms as competitors, but they are more concerned about the offline, which could affect their market share. So say if I'm a seller, what is stopping me from negotiating with the buyer and getting, for example, say 10% more than my usual fee, and not pay Fiverr the extra 25%? Would that be a win-win for both the buyer and seller if they do it offline?
I think the way you should look at it is with regards to what has happened between Amazon and bookshops. Both still exist. You can
Mm.
run a bookshop profitably. Bookshops have changed their model, uh, and you know we also haven't gone all digital with regards to books. People, it's still 50-50 roughly. And I think what we'll just see happen with Fiverr is Fiverr will never get to 100% digital freelancing. I mean, if we say right now freelancing is done, let's be generous, let's say 5% and 95% is offline. I don't see anything wrong with people pursuing different models. Whatever works best for you. It's not like everyone has to join the online revolution,
Yeah.
and I don't see that as a major threat. I would just say the question is, how fast do more people move from offline to online. And I mean, let's be clear that Fiverr has now reached break even. They've reached that a year earlier than planned, courtesy of COVID. And once you've reached break even and you have a digital platform, I mean, seriously, your margins is, even if it goes down a bit, there's nothing to complain about.
Amazon to Facebook, all of them started as single, single service. So Facebook was just a social platform for college students, and Amazon was just for books. But they've, over the years, because of their incredible management team, they've just expanded their product portfolio in ways people wouldn't have imagined.
And they couldn't have imagined, and
Yeah.
new ideas and new trends arise along the way. I think it's now beyond doubt that the management team of Fiverr is extremely good, which even a year ago people wouldn't have agreed with, which is extraordinary. Which goes to show the value also of research and trend spotting and looking at things that are not widely liked yet.
Yes.
I mean, even in February, if you had mentioned Fiverr to people, most of them would have said, "Is that the place with the really shitty logos?" Um, and no, seriously, I'm not joking. And perceptions can change quite quickly. And if you're into investing, you have to find these tipping points and these emerging trends that are just coming to the surface, and then find the right stocks or other financial instruments to bet on them.
Yeah, I think that the logo issue was one of the brilliant case studies, and I think they had a really big problem with scammy logo creators, and they actually created the Fiverr logo maker and automated 90% of the work, and they've actually managed that problem very elegantly.
Absolutely. And I'm one of those people who got scammed by really bad logo creators. And I'm also one of the people now who occasionally, when I think of a new project or something, I go to the Fiverr logo maker and I play with the parameters and I see what logos come out. And it's unbelievable. Machines now create these
Right.
logos out of nowhere in 5 minutes. I mean, like 30 seconds. And then you can order it from a freelancer and have it polished and slightly amended to fit your criteria. It's unbelievable, and the entrepreneurial opportunity that is coming out of that is beyond anything that we've thought possible.
Yeah. And for me personally, any platform that allows people to be creative and save time at the same time are platforms for the future. So take Spotify. Spotify is a good example. It enhances creativity. Then YouTube, and there's so many of those platforms now. And Fiverr is just pretty much, you have everything in that. You have video editing, sound editing, all of that in one place. So yeah, I'm really bullish on Fiverr as well.
Yeah, very good.
And
So now that we are both bullish about it, it probably really will correct by 50%.
it's
As it
usually the case.
as it always does, inevitably. So our listeners should also take all of these words of optimism with a pinch of
A grain
salt.
of salt. Yeah.
Market timing is always a different subject than long-term optimism.